There's this one battle, fought more than half a century ago, that holds the key to understanding why some of the most powerful armies on Earth still suffer these just shocking defeats today. And its lessons? They're more important now than ever. So here's the big question, right? The puzzle that's kept military thinkers up at night for decades. How can an army with all the best firepower, all the advanced tech, and overwhelming logistics just get completely shut down on the battlefield? Well, the answer starts in a really remote valley in Southeast Asia. Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 1954. We're in the middle of the First Indochina War at a place called Dien Bien Phu. The French army has built this massive garrison here, a fortress so strong that Western military experts basically called it unbreakable. They were in for a rude awakening. So how in the world did the French get it so spectacularly wrong? Well, their entire plan was built on a series of assumptions that turned out to be, well, fatal illusions. The French command, they made three huge miscalculations. First, they were absolutely convinced their artillery would just own the valley. Second, they thought their airstrip was totally secure for resupply. And third, they believed their modern logistics were untouchable. They were wrong on every single point. The Viet Minh did the impossible. They dragged heavy artillery up the steep, jungle-covered hills overlooking the base, which made that airstrip useless from day one and just shattered the French illusion of dominance. So how on earth did they pull this off? General Giap, the Vietnamese commander, mobilized a literal army of peasant porters, a staggering 30,000 of them. It was a human supply chain on a scale the French mind just couldn't even process. And their secret weapon? It wasn't some high-tech gadget. It was, get this, bicycles. Just ordinary bikes, but they were reinforced to carry massive loads, over 200 kilos, through these dense jungle paths where a truck could never, ever go. This brilliant, low-tech solution, this peasant-powered supply chain, is what brought a modern, mechanized army to its knees. But the real lesson here, it goes way beyond just tactics and logistics. The defeat at Dien Bien Phu, it really signaled a massive shift in how war itself is fought. This is where we get to this idea of a war amongst the people. What that means is the battlefield isn't some patch of dirt anymore. The battlefield is the population, the people in their homes, in their villages. That's the prize, and winning them over is the only way to win. For a foreign army, this is an almost impossible problem to solve. Analyst Alan Stevens just absolutely nails the problem with this quote. What a powerful Western country calls an expeditionary force, the folks on the ground see as an invasion force. That one difference in how you see things, it changes everything. Right away, the foreign army is seen as occupiers, not heroes. So to deal with all this danger, what happens? Well, these invading armies, they develop what Stevens calls a barrier mentality. They build these huge, secure bases, like the Australian base at Nui Dat in Vietnam, which physically and culturally cuts them off from the very people they're supposed to be winning over. And this isn't just some dusty old history, you guys. We've seen this exact same echo decades later. Just look at the massive concrete blast walls the US put up all over Baghdad. Yeah, it makes military sense, I guess. But what they really are is a giant concrete admission that you are not with the people. You are walled off from them. Okay, so modern militaries, they know this is a problem, right? And they've tried to come up with a solution, a concept they call the three-block war. The basic idea is that a single soldier has to be a warrior, a peacekeeper, and a humanitarian aid worker, all at the same time. Picture this. In one city block, a soldier might be handing out food. In the very next block, they're trying to keep two angry factions apart. And then, just around the corner, they're in a full-blown firefight for their life. It sounds great in a PowerPoint presentation, but is it actually realistic for a human being to do? I mean, just look at the list of demands here. To pull this off, a single soldier is expected to be an anthropologist, a linguist, a diplomat, a city planner, and a lethal fighter, all while being in constant mortal danger. Is that even possible? So what does Alan Stevens think of all this? Well, he doesn't mince words. He calls the three-block war an intellectual house of cards. He's basically saying it's a fantasy, a concept built on skills and capabilities that armies just don't have and probably can't get. It asks for the impossible. Okay, so if these kinds of missions are so incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible, it makes you ask bigger questions, right? Questions about a country's entire military strategy. Stevens looks at his own country, Australia, to frame this choice between two very different ways of thinking. So on one side, you have the expeditionary strategy. This is about fighting wars far away from home alongside big allies like the US or the UK to kind of earn security credits. And this has pretty much been the main approach. On the other side, you have the defense of Australia strategy. This one's all about self-reliance, focusing on defending your own turf and controlling the air and sea right around you. So, how has that expeditionary model been working out in the real world? Well, according to Stevens, the report card is not good. His words, he calls the results one disaster, one fiasco, one disaster in waiting, and a few blunders. Ouch. That is a pretty brutal review of these foreign interventions. And this is what's so wild. This brings us right back to where we started. The real tragedy here isn't just that these mistakes happen, it's that we seem to make them over and over and over again. The warnings are right there, written down in history, but so often nobody reads them. Way before the US got really bogged down in Vietnam, a historian named Bernard Fall published this incredible book, Street Without Joy. It was a brilliant, painful breakdown of exactly how and why the French failed. It was basically the entire blueprint for the disaster that was about to happen to the Americans. Decades later, you have someone like General Colin Powell looking back on this, and his words are just haunting. He wrote that he couldn't help but think that if President Kennedy or Johnson had just spent one quiet weekend reading that book, they might have understood the quicksand they were walking into. The potential price of not reading that one book is just staggering to think about. And if you want the most chilling echo of all, here it is. Street Without Joy wasn't just a book title. It was a real place, a road nicknamed by French soldiers because of the constant bloody ambushes. Years later, a U.S. unit got ambushed on that same road using the same tactics. After the fight, a soldier found a small marker, a memorial to French soldiers who had died in the exact same spot, in the exact same way. It's the ultimate unlearned lesson, isn't it? History doesn't just rhyme. Sometimes it's a direct, word-for-word repeat. Which leaves us with this one really tough final question. When the echoes of the past are this loud and this clear, whose job is it to actually listen?